Maya.
Echo Episode 1 has connections to Thor and sets up a whole new corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I think will be explored in the next Spider-Man film. Welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in Episode 1 of Echo. Now first of all, even though Marvel is dropping all of these episodes in one day, we are going to be covering them one at a time. I've only watched one episode so far, but so far I think the show is so good that it deserves a breakdown for each individual episode.
Because it's what you deserve.
And I just have to tell you guys, I loved this first episode and I cannot wait to break this show down for you. And by the way, in celebration of Echo, we have created new designs at our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we design the merch ourselves. We have this Nelson and Murdoch shirt of a vigilante holding the scales of justice, this Nelson and Murdoch Law and Order parody tee, the name Echo in sign language with a sun symbol, the return of the king, and of course, Doug as Daredevil. Look, shopping our merch store is the best way to support our channel, and thank all of you so much for watching.
I love you guys.
And coming up very soon, we have our very first ScreenCrush live show on February 22nd in Brooklyn, New York. The link for tickets is below. You can meet the team, see exclusive videos like this one where I yell at a puppet of J.J. Abrams. I know why I like Star Wars, and I don't need a repilot like The Force Awakens.
What's a repilot?
You are a repilot. Your whole career. Stop making movies. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please join us. Links are below. Back to Echo. First, let me give you a little background on this character from the comics, because this is going to give us an idea of where the show is headed and how she's going to fit into the larger MCU. Maya Lopez is a fairly new character, created in 1999 by David Mack and Joe Quesada during their excellent run on the Daredevil comic book. In the comics, she has Cheyenne and Latin American ancestry, which has been changed to Choctaw in this series. Just like in the MCU, she was practically raised by the Kingpin, who manipulated her into becoming an assassin and trying to kill Daredevil. In the comics though, Matt and Maya fell in love, cause you know how Murdoch is. Maya eventually learns the Kingpin killed her dad and she shoots him in the head, blinding him, similar to what she's done to him in the Hawkeye series finale.
Sometimes family doesn't see eye to eye.
In the comics, Maya actually has powers similar to the Taskmaster. She can watch other people and perfectly echo their skills. Now this is true of fighting, but she is also a gifted concert pianist, despite being born deaf. Later, Maya took on the identity of Ronin and joined the Avengers to help them fight the Hand, who you'll remember were the big bads in the Netflix Marvel shows. So now, that's the background, let's break down this episode.
Break it down!
The show begins with a TVMA warning, which is a huge departure for Marvel Studios. But you know, we are about to get the R-rated Deadpool 3, and now this is showing us that Marvel is ready to expand into grittier, street-level, more violent stories under this new Spotlight imprint.
Oh yeah, what's the Spotlight thing mean?
Well, Spotlight is this new thing they're doing where basically it means that you can come into the story fresh with no knowledge of prior MCU stories. They actually did something similar in 1998 when Marvel relaunched Daredevil and a few other titles as part of their Marvel Knights imprint. And even here, like, the Marvel logo is grittier with rough edges. So it makes me really excited for what they're going to make going forward.
They made her emo!
So now I want to talk about this opening story and how it connects to Thor, Avengers Age of Ultron, and sets up this entire episode.
Hey, only friends, guess what? You're having some kind of problem that requires a solution? Nope, I just got engaged. I'm going to be married.
Oh my god, that's great! Congratulations, man, that's fantastic!
Congratulations, marriage and stuff, alright. But you know, I am worried about losing more of my hair before the wedding. I was just looking at Christmas pictures and you can really tell it's thinning.
Dude, if your hair is thinning, don't just worry about it. You can actually do something about it with Keeps. They're the sponsor of this video. You guys will not believe how many guys start losing their hair, but then for some reason they put off doing something about it. Keeps is clinically proven to work. In fact, I've been a Keeps customer for more than 2 years now. So with Keeps, I get a personalized plan from a licensed medical provider without even leaving my home. I can even message that medical provider at any time via Keeps' secure messaging portal.
Wow, so you really use Keeps?
I sure do. You see guys, there is a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time.
Yeah, but does it really work?
Yes. According to clinical studies, treatments offered by Keeps are 90% effective at treating hair loss and can increase hair growth by up to 35%. In fact, most Keeps customers see results within 6 months of starting treatment. So it is important to act fast, and you have to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. Keeps stopped my hair loss right in its tracks, and they have helped nearly 1 million men like us keep their hair. That is why Keeps has more than 4,500 5-star reviews. Believe me, you're going to want to make this your New Year's resolution. I would have lost my hair years ago if it weren't for Keeps. So guys, if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, don't ignore it or hope it goes away. Do something about it right now, because hair loss stops with Keeps. To get a special offer, go to keeps.com/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/ScreenCrush. Now, back to what I was saying. Okay, let's go to our first shot of the series, a spiral inside a pool underneath the earth. So this is Maya and her cousin retelling the Choctaw creation story. As the myth goes, the creator fashioned the first people from a great mound, which is why the people in this intro seem to be made from dirt or clay. Then, so the story goes, they travel through a long cave into daylight, and then they became the Choctaw people. Basically what we see here when their clay skin cracks and gives way to human flesh. But that's just all the stuff I read on Wikipedia for this video. There's actually a lot more to this story if you take a slightly deeper dive. Following their emergence on land, the Choctaw survived a great flood and wandered for years until they found their home. So a key part of this story is that there were two birds that survived the flood. One being the male downy woodpecker called the Bizkinnick, which means good news in Choctaw, and is actually the name of their tribal newspaper to this very day.
Hey, that's all very similar to the story of Noah and the flood.
Yes, actually it is, and this is where it gets really interesting. In The Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell talks about how certain myths unite humankind regardless of our geography, and there are always two competing creation myths. Campbell talks about one Native American myth from the Southwest where the first people emerged from holes in the ground, similar to how Adam in the book of Genesis was made from dust. See, myths like these and the one of the Choctaw people are often the myths of agrarian people who are a planting culture. You see, early humans survived in one of two ways, either by planting or by hunting and herding. And all through human history and myth, these two cultures are often at odds. From the farmer Cain and his herding brother Abel, all the way through to the farmer and the cowman in Oklahoma.
Ain't nobody gonna slug out anything. This here's a party.
So, what we're seeing here is that there is always a push-pull between putting down roots and being nomadic. And I bring this up because this is Maya's journey this season. She was firmly rooted in Oklahoma and was uprooted to New York. She became a nomad, separated from her true family, and now she has come home. And of course, this is the MCU, so it's very likely that this creation myth we see is literally true.
Laura was a myth, and now I study him in my physics class.
That the first Choctaw were actually aliens or from another dimension, similar to the people of Ta Lo that we saw in Shang-Chi. There's another hint to that we might talk about a little bit later. So we see them emerge from these pools, and this might remind you with the pool that Thor used to communicate with the Norns in Age of Ultron. By the way, the deleted scene, it's much better. So, the pool shows Thor a divine vision of the future, the Infinity Stones, and Thanos forming them into a gauntlet. And in this show, we get two sequences that connect Maya to her ancestors. So this hints that the first Choctaw, Chaffa, was actually Maya's ancestor. So if Maya does end up having powers, like in the comics, it could be due to some ancient alien DNA that's dormant in her genes. I should also note that honoring ancestors is very important in Choctaw culture. In that creation myth that I mentioned earlier, the nomadic tribe carried their ancestors' bones with them, but then reburied them when they found their new home.
Yeah, I think you might be reaching with the alien DNA stuff.
Maybe, but you know what? The lines on the first people's faces remind me an awful lot of the Nazca lines in Peru. But also, they make these people look an awful lot like an alien race. Look, I'm just saying, the MCU really likes to over-explain their magic and mystery, so don't be surprised if she is part alien. And while I'm talking about lines, the creation pool featured a spiral. Now, spirals often appear in nature, from our DNA to the shape of spiral galaxies. Many spirals, like a nautilus shell, actually form what's called a Fibonacci spiral, or the golden ratio, where each curve is twice the size of the previous curve. The recurrence of this pattern is often used as proof of God or intelligent design, and in the MCU, this could mean that the Choctaw were created by an alien race. So this is when we see this is all a story being told with shadow puppets. Now, shadow puppets are a primal storytelling tool, and in some ways they are humanity's original cinema. It's an ancient method used to tell these ancient stories, and I think these ancient myths are going to be repeated and reenacted by the events in this show. And then we get the return of young Maya, played by Darnell Besaw, the real-life cousin of Maya actress Alaqua Cox. Cox, by the way, is deaf, just like the character she plays. Now, Maya's uncle is played by the legendary Native American actor Graham Greene, who has been in great films like Dances with Wolves and the Twilight series. Now, as they leave the house, Maya's aunt spots the same woodpecker that appeared in the Choctaw creation myth. So the woodpecker is a sign of news or change, and her aunt immediately sees this as a bad omen.
What do you mean the news will change?
Well, in the creation myth, when the first people were looking for a home, this woodpecker would give them a warning by tapping out messages on trees. Like in the show, the woodpecker landed on the spiral of the first Choctaw person's hand, implying that change was about to happen, creating a new tribe and a new world. So the appearance of the woodpecker here is a warning, an indication that change is about to happen. And this idea of transformation is also hinted at in the kitchen. When her mother says that she'll go to the store, she is standing in front of refrigerator magnets of butterflies. And in nature, butterflies are a sign of transformation and rebirth. So I think Maya's aunt definitely has mystical powers.
Ancestors whispering in your ear again?
Now, even though he's teasing her here, I think all of this, plus the appearance of the woodpecker, is proof that the supernatural in Echo is real, and that Echo has these powers connected through her bloodline. So when they're in the truck, Patsy Cline's Walking After Midnight is playing. The song is about a woman who has lost her love and searches for him in the late hours.
Just like Maya is searching for hot chocolate.
Kind of, but it's more about how after this night, Maya will always feel incomplete. Literally, because she loses her leg, and figuratively, since she loses her mother. Afterwards, Maya will be haunted by survivor's guilt for the rest of her life, blaming herself for asking her mom to leave the house. But the blame really lies with her father. See, even back then, he was a criminal, and one of his rivals cut the brake line of the truck to try and kill him. And this brings us up to the events of Hawkeye, and much of the footage that we see in this episode is actually taken directly from the Hawkeye series, and pretty seamlessly woven into this narrative. And I gotta tell you guys, I actually loved how they did this. One, it helped to see the events of that show from a different perspective, but two, it also gave us a Maya origin story for viewers who didn't necessarily see that show. And actually, I think the first episode of Ahsoka should have done something like this. You know, create like a quick catch-up opening sequence to show casual viewers who Ahsoka is, instead of just assuming that the audience had watched 4 seasons of an animated series on Disney XD.
But I digress.
So, in the scene with Maya and her dad, where they talk about dragons, he says that dragons are real, but they live in a different world. Which is true. We saw that in Shang-Chi. But he also talks about traveling between 2 worlds, which is what he does. Living the life of a family man and also a gangster. And now, Maya is on that same path. She is trying to become a new queen of crime, but she's also traveled home among her close friends and family. In other words, it's like she's living in 2 worlds at once. I think that we're going to see Maya make a choice in this series. Will she become a crime boss or a hero? I mean, this is what her father is alluding to here when he says that she will have to walk in 2 worlds. I think he's saying that he doesn't necessarily want her to live the same life that he has. He dreams of her being better and legit.
I never wanted this for you. That you would be the one to hold the strings. Senator Corleone.
But he could also just be referring to her disability. You see, the deaf community uses the phrase the hearing world to refer to people who can hear. In many ways, Maya will always be divided from most people around her, so she has to learn to walk in both of these worlds. And by the way, this conversation was also foreshadowing her final fight with Kazi in that series. So in this montage, we actually see a deleted scene of Maya speaking to Fisk that was cut from the Hawkeye series. My theory's always been that they intended to reveal Kingpin earlier, but then they decided to save his reveal for the end to keep up the show's mystery, because mysteries like Mephisto got WandaVision so much attention from fans, and so they were trying to generate the same buzz for Hawkeye. When she spars in the gym, the song playing is Crazy by Doechii, and the lyrics are basically about a woman who people are calling crazy, but none of these hating-ass bitches even faze her. In the same way, Maya does not care that people see her as disabled or weak because she can just kick their ass. Then we get the next Hawkeye flashback to the night Ronan, aka Clint Barton, killed her father at Fat Man Auto Repair, of course named after Wilson Fisk. Now, all of this was in the show Hawkeye, but they added the additional scenes of Maya ignoring texts from her cousin Bonnie and her getting into trouble with the law. Now, in Hawkeye, Clint has the whole tearful scene with her when he tells her that Kingpin had her father killed.
Your boss wanted your father dead.
And now, we get a pretty clear idea why he had him killed. I think that Fisk was always grooming Maya to be an assassin. He wanted her father gone so he could better control her and become her new father figure. And remember, at this point in the timeline, Daredevil had been around for a while, so Fisk would have been looking for his own fighter who could match up against the man without fear.
None of my men have ever held their own with him like that. You did better than even I expected.
After all, he recruited Benjamin Poindexter for the same reason in Daredevil Season 3. So in the limo, we see Fisk really start to manipulate Maya when he tells her,
My father was killed also.
not mentioning that he was the person who killed his father when he was just a kid. And notice how his hand trembles ever so slightly when he says this, like he can still feel the way that hammer vibrated up his arm when he killed his father. Even just like the memory that Vincent D'Onofrio loads into this line.
The pain that I felt in the wake of that moment.
He is so perfect in this part, and guys, we are so lucky to have this corner of the MCU be explored right now. Now, we also saw Kingpin employ a similar tactic in Hawkeye when he told her,
Maya, you and I, we're family.
Now, this is a running theme in the show Hawkeye, of characters trying to earn empathy or at least recognize elements of themselves in one another. Like when Clint told her about his own grief, he said,
You and I were the same.
But here, the Kingpin is warping this idea of empathy, using it to send Maya on her first assassination mission, and man, is this fight great. Kingpin assigns her to shadow a couple of heavies, and the way this scene begins so suddenly is jarring.
Kingpin thanks you for your loyalty.
And that immediately puts us in Maya's shoes. She's overwhelmed and surprised, so we are overwhelmed and surprised. So from this point on, the entire fight is staged like a oneer.
What's a oneer?
Well, a oneer is a one-take scene. Like back in the day, these were really hard to pull off. Like for instance, the one-take funeral sequence from Soy Cuba that still blows my mind to this day. And like for action scenes, oneers are used to showcase incredible fight choreography and camera choreography as well. A great example of this is the epic oneer from Oldboy. But this has also been a trademark of the Daredevil Netflix series. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 all featured extended, brutal, one-take fight sequences. Now, CGI has made these oneers easier to pull off as cinematographers can now move away from the in-camera tricks like the ones Hitchcock used in the movie Rope. And by the way, the only reason Hitchcock even had to cut was because he had to hide the real changes in his camera. So now though, we have entire movies like 1917 and Birdman that are filmed as just one take, with the aid of CGI. But I especially love seeing oneers in action scenes. Like in the early 2000s, there was this fast cut style of editing that became really popular thanks to like the Bourne movies.
That's Jason Bourne.
See, I always hated that because you can't see a thing, and it seems like it's being used to cover a bad action choreography. But in more recent years, shows like True Detective, The Bear, or Daredevil have used the oneer to immerse the audience into the world and to show off really great fight choreography. In fact, I think if you want to see the evolution of fight scenes over a decade, compare these clips from Batman Begins and Batman v Superman. Now, back to Echo. In this sequence, I say it's staged like a oneer because there are a few clever cuts hidden here and there, and some places where they use CGI to blend in different shots. But still, this is a solid 4 minutes of top-tier action and camera choreography that is just filled with tiny details. Notice how the tracking shot begins on Maya, so we see her reaction to this space, but we can't see what she sees, and this is making us feel anxious because we can't see what's about to happen, and thereby this is creating an empathetic connection to her. And then the big guy bursts into the room, and notice how his partner had flanked the guard from the other side and took advantage of the distraction to pop him in the head. The camera then dances around the room slowly as these two guys are doing their best. And like, notice how they faked a bullet here by having this guy's mug explode, and then he like turns and reacts to being shot. But I also appreciate that unlike most cups in movies, this one actually spilled liquid right here. Now then, the music and action slowly fade out as we close in on Maya, seeing events strictly from her point of view, just like in the motorcycle shop earlier in the episode. We see her look of shock, and we see the world as she sees it, not being able to hear what's going on around her. Then there's another tricky cut when this guy dives on her, rabbit punching her in the ribs. Best place to nail somebody in a fight, by the way. And then all we hear is what Maya can feel. Her own heartbeat, right up until this. By turning down all the other sounds, the editors made sure that we could really feel that snap. This is top tier sound design, because this is Maya's turning point when she becomes a criminal, because now killing is making her feel good. And then the music starts back up, and she goes to work, kicks a chair at this guy, takes down his friend, and then goes to work on the first guy's knees to keep him off balance, throwing him into a desk. And then after a tuck and roll, she smiles when she sees a security guard that tried to feel her up. Then she hits him so hard, his head dents the filing cabinet. But then, my God, we get to see fully comic accurate Daredevil striking a pose that is straight from the Frank Miller comics. Yes! Ah, yes. Again, do it again. Now notice here that the music changes. We started this scene with the diegetic song playing in the background, Pretty Waste by Bones UK. But then, when Daredevil shows up, the music switches to a traditional superhero score. showing that the man without fear is now in control of the action. And he has a comic-accurate billy club with an extension cable, which we never really saw him use in the Netflix series.
I've been watching them all night.
Hey, it's kind of weird though that he says he's been watching them all night, but then I guess he just doesn't stop them from murdering all these dudes.
Doug, it's Daredevil. It's awesome.
Continue.
There is just so much to love in this fight. The way he does a jump and barrel rolls over the fence, when he ducks her blow when he's facing away from her because of his radar sense, or the way that he starts off kind of toying with Echo, testing her, but then when he's just a little bit overmatched, he throws the shelf onto her to get away. So the fight ends up being a draw, but it impresses Kingpin enough to hire her full-time to run the tracksuit mafia that we saw on the show Hawkeye. And by the way, Kingpin is living in a penthouse very much like the one he had in the Daredevil Netflix show. And then we see Maya pull off missions for Kingpin, even driving the 1970 Dodge Challenger that we saw her drive in the Hawkeye series, which was also taken from the comic book. And then that takes us up to the events of the ending of that show. And now we cut to 5 months later when she is still hurting from a stab wound.
Yeah, who stabbed her?
Well, maybe Kazi gave this to her in their last fight, but you'd think that she would have died of an infection 5 months later, so I think this is probably from a bounty hunter trying to take her out when she was on her way to Oklahoma. She patches herself up, and that is actually one attribute that she shares with Matt Murdock. When he was a kid, he learned how to do first aid by patching up his boxer father, and he also sews up his own wounds in the Netflix show. She dreams of several other Choctaw women, starting with the woman that we saw in the creation story, then the first Choctaw emerging from the Great Mound, then a woman painted with similar markings to the people in the creation story, a black and white image of another woman, and finally a woman with a stick in her mouth about to experience great pain or a seizure. Now I'm sure this will all make sense in the next episode. Some of you have probably already watched the next episode. My personal theory is all these women are connected to her. They're like reincarnations of her that have lived throughout the ages. Now a friend of the channel, Ken Christensen, is a writer for Echo and reached out to us with some cool behind the scenes facts, like how the show works so hard to create an accurate reflection of the Choctaw Nation. For instance, there's a pawn shop called Scully, and in Choctaw, Scully means money. And apparently Echo's costume at the end of the series contains a lot of Choctaw symbolism that we're going to break down in just a few days. The premiere was even held at a Choctaw casino in Oklahoma, and according to director Sidney Freeland, they gave the scripts to the Choctaw Nation to review. In fact, they even dubbed every single episode fully into the Choctaw language.
Man, that is so cool.
Yes, it is. Now, her conversation with her cousin Biscuits sets up the other world of this episode, the world of her childhood family and friends, as we take a tour of her hometown. And we end on Black Crow's skating rink, where, yep, they say, "Make America Skate Again." Now, this is important though, because this seems like it's just a play on Make America Great Again, but it's also a play for nostalgia. See, skating rinks used to be immensely popular in the United States for decades. Then, like in the 90s, they kind of died off. So, when Maya enters, she enters to a needle drop of Jay Giles' band Centerfold. Now, the song is about a guy who sees his long-lost love posing in a nudie magazine, and the subtext here that the pure memories of his youth have been tainted because his ex is now selling sex.
Yeah, that message doesn't age well. It's her body. Let her do what she wants with it.
Yeah, you're right, it doesn't age well, but the song is a bop. And here, the song is used to show how Maya's past has also faded. The retro skating rink from her innocent childhood actually houses a secret criminal empire. But the kids there still play the same games that she did, red light, green light. And actually, I'm betting the reason they use actual red and green lights is because Maya couldn't hear the calls when she was a kid. And also, seeing her bathed in red light is a callback to her first appearance in Hawkeye, when she was feeling the beat of a bass speaker with her hand. Her childhood friend Black Crow gets her patched up, and then they go to a tower, which is interesting because the episode begins buried beneath the earth, as we saw the beginnings of the Choctaw people. But the episode ends with them in the sky, as Maya names her aspirations. She wants Fisk's empire for herself. She wants to become a queen. Very similar to the first Choctaw person from the creation myth. A queen who is able to lead her people from the Great Mound to find their true home. And then her friend refuses to help her or bring a war to their people. But then there's this tag. We fade to white and we see an IV drip of Wilson Fisk's hospital bed. Now, in the Daredevil series, white was always symbolic of the Kingpin's quest for purity. He obviously is famous for wearing a white coat, but also his father made him stare at a blank wall when he was a child. Vanessa sold him a white painting called Rabbit in a Snowstorm. And when he was in prison, he also sat on his cot and stared at a white wall. This is because his stated goal was to take New York City and make it clean and pure. So it's perfect that he's introduced as this pure white field, out of focus, to show how his dream of purity is now becoming lost. And interrupting that dream, that beautiful white field, is the IV drip. It's the reality of his injuries now interfering with this blissful dream of his. Now his eye is bandaged with an X, just like it was in the comics after Maya shot him. I think that what we're seeing here is Kingpin emerging as a kind of Thanos for these street level heroes. People like Daredevil, Echo, and Punisher will have to team up against him, and maybe they'll even bring back other Netflix heroes like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage.
Oh, what about Iron Fist?
Oh, you're right. They should totally bring back Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. And remember, Spider-Man is now a street-level hero. He doesn't have a high-tech suit. He's just a web-slinger in New York City. So maybe the next Spider-Man movie could be the culmination of this Kingpin storyline.
Wait, I thought the next Spider-Man movie was going to be about him getting a Venom suit. Remember that post-credit scene with Venom? That was cool.
Okay, so maybe in the next movie, Peter gets frustrated that he no longer has a high-tech suit. So that makes him embrace the Venom symbiote. Hell, I mean, the symbiote influences him to do evil things, so maybe the cash-strapped Peter Parker can actually even accept a job from Fisk to help protect him from Daredevil. I mean, I love to theorize about this kind of thing, and I think the show is just the beginning of a very exciting corner for the MCU.
Hey, I just want to say thanks for the keeps. I got to keep my hair.
Hey, very good. And just a reminder to stop your hair loss today, click our link in the description for a special offer from Keeps. Well guys, that's our breakdown of Echo Episode 1. I am loving this series so far. I'm really curious why Marvel decided to drop it on one day. I really wish they hadn't. Let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.